Breaking news. Sorry. Your water might be killing you. Oh, thank God this is vodka. Delicious. I'm glad I made the healthy choice, but it turns out that The Guardian conducted a study of 120 tap water samples across the country and found that 118 of those had unhealthy chemicals like lead, arsenic, or a little thing known as PFAS. But apparently, America's water supplies are really in a state of crisis, and very few people are talking about it, so we'll be taking a look at that tonight.
This is Politically Explained.
With me, Cronker Watt. The study found that of the 120 tap water sampled across the country, 118 of them had lead, 8% had unsafe levels of arsenic, and 35% had unsafe levels of a chemical known as PFAS. What? My cameraman Tony just informed me that it's actually pronounced PFAS, which is not nearly as fun to say as PFAS, so I guess this story is actually already off to a terrible start, and I can't see it getting any worse from here. Wait a minute, Tony, isn't there some sort of government agency, though, to make sure that our water isn't poisonous? Oh, apparently that's the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA for short. Apparently they're supposed to protect our environment. I guess they're well named, but maybe not that well named because they kinda dropped the ball on this one, and so our water is kind of poisoned now. For instance, with the case of arsenic, back in the early 2000s, the EPA was considering setting the legal arsenic limit in water down to 3 ppb, which is what health experts say is the safe amount. However, they decided that would cost too much for the country's water system, so instead they set it to 10 ppb. And a 2014 study found that there was a link between arsenic levels of 5 ppb or higher in your water and an IQ reduction of 5 to 6 points in children. But hey, the EPA managed to save water systems across the country a bunch of money, so, maybe it was worth it. Besides, who even cares about what was it again, Tony? Oh, right, the children. I mean, they can't even do anything cool, like drink or smoke. I had to babysit Tony's nephew once, and it was a terrible time. I had to settle for these little candy cigarettes because I can't even smoke around him, and they taste like chalk. They're really bad. Really, they don't even have nicotine. What's the point? There's also the issue of lead. You see, even though lead pipes were outlawed in 1986, 3 to 6 million American homes still get their water through lead pipes. And the EPA has been pretty chill about the whole thing, because you only have to test for lead every 3 years, 9 in some cases, and they only have to test a very small sample, so they might be missing the most at-risk houses. And the violations are probably a lot worse than we know, since the last EPA audit of the states found that 92% of lead and copper pipe violations were not reported to the federal government. Now, that audit was actually all the way back in 2008, and there hasn't been one since because due to budget cuts, the EPA actually had to discontinue their annual audit of state files. But hey, it seems like they were doing fine, They were only misreporting 92% of cases, so that's like an A. An A of bad things, but still an A. And once again, children are the ones that are the most affected by lead, as ingesting even small quantities of lead can lead to learning and emotional behavioral problems in children. Wait, you know what I just remembered, Tony? I used to be a child. Oh man, remembering that makes me feel kind of bad for the little rascals. And I'll admit, their cigarettes aren't half bad. I've been getting used to them, and this is actually my 3rd pack while filming. Maybe we should be helping the children, Maybe it's worth a few extra bucks to not poison them. Oh man, talking like a big old softie. I guess I just have a big, big heart. Man, I'm a good person. Lastly, there are PFAS, which are known as forever chemicals because they don't really break down over time. And they've been linked to learning delays in children and cancers, including testicular cancer. And if the EPA kind of dropped the ball with lead and arsenic, they humongo dropped the ball with PFAS chemicals because they don't regulate them at all. You see, instead of having real legal limits on how many PFAS chemicals can be in your water, they instead have voluntary limits, which basically means it's just a suggestion. And even those suggested limits only apply to 2 types of PFAS chemicals, and that limit is set at 70 ppt, even though a Harvard professor who studies PFAS chemicals thinks the healthy limit should be 1 ppt. Now, I don't know what ppt is, but using my crazy math whiz skills, I know that 70 is at least 5 times bigger than 1. What? Oh, Apparently, it's actually exactly 70 times bigger than one. Who knew? And the water crisis gets even worse when you look specifically at marginalized communities. For instance, poor counties have twice as many violations as rich counties, and rural counties have 28% more violations than urban ones, and counties that are 25% Hispanic or higher have twice as many violations as the rest of the country. Apparently, even the water in this country is racist and classist. Who knew? There's also the infamous case of Flint, Michigan, where in 2014 their water system was changed as a cost-saving measure, and the result was that the water became contaminated with extremely high levels of lead. Despite the water looking like this, and there being health complaints as soon as the water systems changed, the government didn't recognize the health issue until a full year and a half after the lead had already started being entered into the water system. And to this day, thousands of people still line up every week to get free bottles of water that they have to get from a charity because the government discontinued their official handing out of water to the people of Flint. The people of Flint, Michigan line up every week to get bottles of water because they still do not trust the tap water quality, in part because many still have lead pipes to this day. And thousands of children were permanently impacted by the lead crisis. The percentage of Flint, Michigan third graders who passed Michigan standardized reading tests went from 41% prior to the crisis all the way down to 10%. And we don't have any snarky comments to add here. Now, the reason why America's water systems are so poo-poo is because they're super underfunded. I guess we were spending too much money on the important stuff, like spending more on the military than the next 7 countries combined, or giving the massive tax cuts to the rich. Important stuff, unlike water. However, lately there have been attempts to put money towards fixing our water systems. For instance, last year the House passed a bill that would have appropriated $22.5 billion to replacing the lead pipe systems in the country. Unfortunately, it died in the Senate. And currently, President Biden is actually trying to pass a $2 trillion infrastructure package that, amongst other things, would finally replace all lead pipes in the country, only a full 35 years after they were initially outlawed. However, some Republicans have recently tried to argue that fixing the country's water systems isn't real infrastructure, which is a little confusing because they did think it was when Trump was president, but now I guess not. Go figure. And it's not just Republicans. Shitbag Democrat Joe Manchin recently said that he wouldn't support Biden's infrastructure package if it raised corporate taxes from 21% to 28%. I guess raising taxes on multi-billion-dollar corporations is just too high of a cost for having water that's not poisoning us. Which is a little confusing to me because the corporate tax rate used to be 35% before the Trump tax cuts, but I guess Joe Manchin is just that much of a corporate shithead. But hey, maybe we'll get lucky and the government will actually be able to do something so that we don't keep drinking poisonous water. Also, if you're liking the episode so far, maybe consider subscribing, liking, or leaving a comment so you can see more of me sometime. But I suppose the real lesson in all of this is that we should all be smart like me and drink vodka instead. What? Oh, apparently I'm being told that's not it, and apparently I may have a drinking problem. Who knew? But no, apparently I'm being told that the real lesson is that the government's priorities have become so perverted that it's failing to meet its most basic functions, like making sure that our water is safe, and that those failures are affecting the most vulnerable amongst us, including poor, rural, and minority communities, and of course children who in some cases are being impacted for life. All while the richest and most powerful have enjoyed fabulous tax cuts and amazing profits. Perhaps it's time for the government to refocus its priorities and fulfill its obligations to all of us, and not just the hyper-wealthy. Alright, that's the end of the episode. Well, even with a pretty strong buzz from all that vodka, I still managed to totally nail this one. I really am amazing. And Tony, you thought I was going to be a bad influence on your nephew, but he's actually the one that got me addicted to these suckers. Go figure.